From the southeastern corner of western North Carolina, this is Folklore. I'm your host, James Hernishin. One of the best parts of producing a podcast is learning that someone is actually listening, and more importantly, listening closely enough that they have a good grasp of what you're actually trying to accomplish. This episode is a product of some feedback from one listener who really does get it. I was asked, why don't I do something about foster kids in Polk County? Apparently, there's a new project based in Saluda, and it really deserves some attention. So, I did a little digging and was pointed in the direction of Kim Wilson, who is a senior social work service manager for the county. Along the long list of items in her job description is overseeing the care of foster children, those kids for whom family life hasn't worked out very well. Kim has been working in the field for decades, and normally I would devote the first few minutes of the episode to learning a bit about her. But in this case, we don't waste too much time on biography, but pretty much get straight to the issue of the scope of the challenge in Polk County when it comes to responding to reports that maybe a child isn't safe at home. I don't know about you, but I had given it very little thought. As a parent, I pretty much focus on my own family and assume that anyone else's child is the responsibility of other parents. But let's face it, there's a good reason the old African proverb that it takes a village to raise a child is so widely used. There are more than a few reasons why a parent or parents might not be up to the task of providing the care that every boy or girl needs. Drug addiction, a history of prior violence, health problems, financial pressures, they can all mean that children don't receive the love and attention that we all want them to have. Of course, removing a child against a parent's wishes from the home should always be a last resort, but it's sometimes necessary, and as Kim told me, the entire community needs to be involved if that kind of intervention is going to have a chance of doing any good. She talked about her department's mission and the new project in Saluda at the Withall Building in Columbus. Kim Wilson, thanks so much for joining the podcast.
Thanks for having me, James.
Let's start by talking about who you are and what you do for the county.
So my name is Kim Wilson. I am the Senior Program Manager for the Polk County Division of Social Services. I've been with the county just over 31 years. I initially started as a direct line social worker doing child protective services. I did that for about 15 years. I then stepped into the role of supervising a child protective services team. Did that for about 12 years, and I have since become the program manager. Part of my job responsibilities there are for the oversight of the child welfare program with Polk County Division of Social Services, but also our adult protective services programs.
That's quite a portfolio.
It's a long history. It says I'm old.
Well, it also speaks to the fact that in Polk County, you don't get to have one little tiny job description, right?
No, you don't. It's not uncommon. I think you'll find when you talk to county employees that they have multiple roles that they fill. We also at our office serve as shelter staff when the county has a weather-related disaster and we need to open a shelter or a warming station. We have staff from our division that will staff that. So we wear lots of hats.
All right. Well, you're on the podcast because I wanted to talk to somebody whose primary responsibility is dealing with kids who have trouble finding a home.
Children in foster care?
Yeah. And so who are you charged with serving?
So we are charged with serving children who may be at risk for abuse and neglect and or dependency. So we have a wide sort of program range. But initially, before children enter into foster care, the agency has had involvement with them prior to that. So someone is concerned about a child in our community that may be being abused or neglected, they will call our office and provide that information to us. Once the information comes in, we put that onto what we call an intake form. We then screen that form to see if the information they've provided meets what the statutory guidelines for North Carolina say is a valid report of child abuse and neglect, for which we have the authority and the responsibility to go assess to determine if there's abuse, neglect, or dependency occurring in that household. If there is, then we're also charged with trying to help work with the family to resolve those issues so the child can safely remain in the home. And during that process, we have to ensure the child's safety. So we're working with the children's immediate family, caregivers, friends, support system to wrap that support around that child so the child can be safe. If the child can't be safe in that situation, then we're charged with seeking intervention from the district court for the district court to either say, parents, you have to do X, Y, and Z, or the child may enter the division's custody, or the court could order the child come into our custody. And that's sort of the entry into foster care for children and families.
It can't be easy trying to figure out and to make the distinction between, okay, here's a situation in which we can find a resolution and keep the kid in the home, and then say, no, actually, it's not going to work. We're going to have to move the child out of the home. I mean, how much effort does it take before you have enough evidence on your plate to take decisive action?
It kind of depends. I mean, we've had cases where we've had a report come in and it was screened in and we've gone out and there's been immediate evidence to say that this child didn't have anyone to care for them or the child's care was unsafe and we had to take immediate action. Typically, that looks like our office filing a petition with the court immediately and asking for non-secure custody. And a non-secure custody situation is essentially where we present evidence to the judge through our attorney to say this needs to happen immediately. We can't wait for there to be a full-blown hearing on the case, and it's done ex parte. And then there are other situations where you go out and you're working with the family. There may be some issue, but there doesn't appear to be an immediate threat to the child's health, well-being, or safety. And you work with that family for a period of time. That can be up to roughly 3 months to 6 months. When you get to the 6-month point in time, if you've not really seen any movement, our state policy encourages us at that point in time to either determine, do we need to file that petition? I mean, you're evaluating that through the whole process. You're making sure the child's safe. But they sort of suggest that that's the window. If you can't resolve issues within about 6 months, then we're encouraged to either say, does the case need to be closed, or do we need to file a petition, take the case to court?
Yeah, I'm trying to get an idea of the scale of the problem. How often, and what percentage of the cases do you think are easily resolved, or, I mean, relatively speaking, in a sense that you don't have to remove the child from the home? So, out of 10 cases, how many could find that resolution?
Sometimes it depends on the month. I mean, it does. I mean, we've had this year we've had approximately, let me call my numbers here real quick. So for 2022, we had 312 phone calls to our office concerned about children in our county.
Almost one a day.
Yeah. So out of that, we looked into about 241 of those cases. And this year so far, we've had 51 children in foster care. Now that's for the fiscal year. As of February 28th, there were 42 kids in foster care. Pretty substantial number, I think, for a fairly small county, which has great school systems. We don't have a high crime rate. I think that's pretty significant.
Well, if we don't have a high crime rate, how do we explain, that 40 or 50 kids?
So most of the children that enter care are entering care due to substance misuse issues, mental health issues of parents, typically chronic or untreated, domestic violence. Those are the three main categories that when kids come into care, they're coming into care for those reasons. We're seeing that across the state and across the country. North Carolina right now, as of December 2022, had just under 11,000 kids in foster care. And the United States, probably around 390,000 kids. Foster care seems to be, it's been increasing. And there's, unfortunately, I think an epidemic of kids in care. Kids don't seem to be being reunited with family at very high rates. We did 14 adoptions last year for kids that were in our care, and 8 were reunified.
After being adopted, you mean?
No.
So 14 were adopted and
8 were reunified. And we had 3 go to guardianship to other caregivers, and we had 2 that aged out of foster care. So 27 kids left our care last year. Only 8 of them went home to the parents we removed them from.
Now, the reason why I thought this was a good idea for a subject for a podcast was that a lot of people don't spend a lot of time thinking about this. It's kind of like an unspoken reality. I mean, I certainly don't spend much time thinking about it. I'm a father of a 16-year-old, and I'm perfectly happy worrying about my family without thinking about the kids who aren't so lucky. And I want to get a little bit more into what the scale of the problem. So 40 to 50 kids in a county of our size, 19, 20,000 people.
What, 2.5 kids for every 1,000 people?
On the one hand, it doesn't sound like a lot, but do I know a family member probably who's been involved in this process? I mean, just statistically?
I think that's hard to say. I think that if you are close to the work, sometimes, yes, you probably do know somebody. But if you've not been close to the work, you may not. I was just trying to think about how to wrap my head around that question.
I bring it up because compared to other situations where, you don't really know people that well sometimes, and you make generalizations, and you might not realize that someone's got a serious problem. And so even though you say, well, I don't know any people like X, the truth is you probably do,
Right. So I do think that some of the issues that bring kids into care, substance misuse, mental health issues, domestic violence, you probably know somebody who is affected or by one of those issues. Whether or not those issues have affected their life in a serious enough way that's resulted in their child being abused or neglected, maybe not. I kind of think of it a lot of times like poverty. We know it's out there. We know it exists, but we're not up close and personal with it. And so sometimes it doesn't we don't see the effects that it's causing in our community because we don't see it. I think there are times it's just too painful for us to see kids in care, families not being together, seeing poverty, and we tend to be avoidant of those topics. They make us feel uncomfortable. Sometimes they make us feel guilty. But it's certainly a problem I think we do have in Polk County. And in 2013, 2014, we had 50 kids in care for the whole year that year. And so in 21, 22, we had 72 kids in care for the whole year. That's a yearly number. So kids of each month will come and go. You may have some new kids come in. We may have a couple of kids leave. So the number each month is probably between 42 and 50 some odd kids each month. But for the year, we had 72 kids in care last year. And that's up from 50 kids in 13, 14.
And does the demographics, like the age range of these kids, is it right from like toddlers to 18-year-olds or 17-year-olds?
I've had birth to 18 and up to 21. So children who enter care, who at their 18th birthday, technically are adults and they can leave foster care if they want. We are working with them to find a transition plan from foster care. But some of them aren't ready to leave foster care. At 18, I couldn't have left my home and be ready to be out on my own. So a number of years ago, the state and the federal government created a program. We refer to it as the 18 to 21 program. And for youth who aren't ready to go, who choose to stay, they can stay in foster care and we can help support their living arrangement. It may be that they choose to live with a foster parent they've been living with. They may be going off to college, and we are helping to support that with a monthly stipend. As long as they meet certain requirements, they could be living in another independent living situation as long as the department or the division has approved it and said, yes, it's safe. And we're working with them around budgeting, around how to be independent. And so those kids can kind of continue to stay and work with our program also. So you kind of have everything from, we've had newborn babies that have been removed and never gone home from the hospital following birth, all the way to kids who up until their 21st birthday that we're working with.
Wow. And again, it's upwards of, sometimes you say like 72 kids?
For the whole year, yeah.
A year. I mean, I'm surprised at that number, I guess. I mean, just because I don't run into foster kids every day of the week, kind of thing. And again, that's why I wanted to talk about this. And in a county as small, although we're kind of lightly populated in some sections, so it's not like everybody's in everybody else's face all the time. But we're still only like 20,000 people. So how do you rehome somebody? And
So we license foster parents. So we have a licensing worker, and part of her primary job responsibility is recruiting, training, licensing, and monitoring families to serve as foster families for these children and youth. It's a hard job. It's a hard job to recruit individuals to do the work. The work's hard. We ask you to provide care for a child, a teen, a youth, with the anticipation that we're working towards this child going home. And so for a lot of folks, that's very emotionally demanding and not something they might feel comfortable doing. We have typically anywhere from about 18 to 22 licensed foster parents each month. We typically lose foster parents due to adoption. So if a child becomes free for adoption, that's in their home, they have the option to adopt the child if they would like to. And so that's probably the greatest place where we lose foster parents, is because they've adopted the children and they're either at their capacity and no longer have room to foster anymore, or they're like, we have adopted this child, we're concluding, our work as foster parents. But that's not enough foster parents for our children. So over the past 10 years, I'd say at any one given time, roughly up to a third of our kids leave the county and are placed in foster care placements outside Polk County. That could be placements such as Baptist Children's Home. It could be Crossner Home for Children. It could be Black Mountain Home for Children. It could be another foster home in a different county through a child placing organization. It could be therapeutic foster care. It could be some sort of treatment program if the child had pretty significant needs due to mental health issues or due to substance misuse. So we have some of those treatment facilities where kids are placed also. But it's just concerning for me that we have sent and continue to send, like I said, about a third of our children outside Polk County each year. It's disruptive to visitation, trying to have kids maintain contacts with family members. They lose friends, they lose school contacts, they lose church contacts, community contacts, extracurricular activities. That's not good for kids. It's not good for their development. It's just good.
Hard to imagine how it could be positive in any way to rip you out of your community unless you really can't stand it in the first place.
Well,
but
I think, even in situations where kids are in homes where there's abuse or neglect occurring, for a government organization to come in and you to have to be removed for your own safety, that's traumatic, even if you're placed within the county. But to be placed outside the county, I can't imagine the fear that creates for a child. It gives me chills up my spine because I think it's just terrifying for a child. Typically, we're better able to place younger children in the county, teens, large sibling groups, children who maybe have some behavioral or some emotional problems or mental health problems are a little more difficult to place. Those are typically children that are more at risk for placement outside the county.
All right. One of the core issues I wanted to explore was what kind of partnerships do you have with non-governmental organizations? Again, churches and any other community groups. How do you work with them to recruit foster parents and manage these kids?
So there's a variety of partnerships that we have with our work. So there's a variety of mental health partnerships, providers that provide outpatient counseling, intensive in-home services. Maybe it's substance misuse counseling. We've had some partners around equine therapy that we are able to provide and work with kids. We have other partners in terms of like the actual foster care placement itself. So As I said, we've only have about 18 to 22 families each month that we have licensed. So we partner with other private child placing organizations. That may be Baptist Children's Homes. It may be Crossnor Home for Children. It may be Black Mountain Home for Children. There are other private organizations that provide therapeutic care. Alexander Children's Network is one of those. Thompson Children's Homes. There are what we call psychiatric residential treatment programs for children who have some pretty concerning mental health issues and need inpatient. It's almost like inpatient treatment, but it's not in a hospital setting, but it's very similar to a hospital setting. We have organizations like the Saluda United Methodist Church that we're partnering with around a foster care project in Saluda. They have been interested in helping create foster homes in Polk County so that some of our kids don't have to leave, as many of them don't have to leave. And so the Saluda United Methodist Church purchased a home, and they are in process of remodeling that home so that Crossnor Communities for Children can license a foster family to put in there to provide care for children here in Polk County. And so it's a really kind of creative project that hasn't been done before. Very widely. I think there are a couple of pilot projects in North Carolina, but Polk County is one of like probably 4 areas that's trying to launch this program.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that. What makes it like a little special? What makes it a different approach?
So part of the different approach is that the foster parents in this home will be paid foster parents as it's their profession, it's their career. So right now, foster parents juggle their own jobs, their own families, those sorts of things, and a foster care child or 2 in their home. This model envisions that we want parents to be able to focus on the needs of the children and work with the children and with the families around whatever is going on with that kid or with that family. So if a child needs to go to therapy, if the child needs to go to a doctor, whatever it is, the parent doesn't have to take off work to go do that. They're at home. They're doing this work with the child, with the family. When I look at foster parents, I don't see how they do it some days. We have lots of our foster parents where both parents work. They go to work. They work an 8-hour job. They come home. They're taking care of foster care kids. They're juggling. The child needs to get to a mental health appointment or the child needs to get to a doctor's appointment. And they're doing that for our foster children and maybe for their own children. So it's a lot. It's a lot also when you think about the fact that the kids coming into care, I think, seem to have more concerning behavioral or emotional health issues than we've seen in the past. I know, we have a couple of kids that we're working with right now that have substance misuse issues, have some pretty concerning mental health issues. And those children's needs really are more than the typical foster parent who's staying at home and working can manage.
Where's the money for this project going to come from?
Oh, that gets into, that's a lot. Yeah. So state, county, and federal. Foster care board rates are paid. So there's funding streams from the federal government, the state, and the county. And a lot of times there's a blend of that funding that pays for foster care board rates.
It just sounds like this new project in Saluda is going to be a little bit more ambitious. We're talking about a whole house and a full-time parents, basically.
Mm-hmm. The cost for that foster parenting program is still going to be less than the cost for what we spend to send a child to a residential program like Baptist Children's Home, Crossnor, or Black Mountain. So for a teenager, let's say a 14-year-old that we've placed maybe at Baptist Children's Home, the cost for that child's care is over $4,500 a month.
Wow.
The cost for the professional foster parenting model, and they're still working on where that cost is going to land, but it's probably going to land around the $3,100 mark. So that's still fairly less expensive than at the other type of facility. What we pay the typical average foster parents is much less than both of those. The state last year upped the rates, but for a teen right now, the board rate what we pay a foster parent, $698 is the state issued board rate for a child that's between the ages of 13 and 18.
And yeah, that's not a whole heck of a lot of money.
No, not a whole heck of a lot of money.
So the people that do this have to be
selfless.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Kids have, and so that board rate includes clothing. It includes everything for that child: lights, water, shelter, food. We don't have a lot of extra funds to supplement that. But we do have some. Probably about 4 years ago, we wanted to try to make sure we found ways to help support teenage kids being placed locally more often. And, we knew that the board rate might be a little bit of an issue. So the county decided that we would help augment the rate for a foster parent who took 18. And so if you take a child that's age 13 or older in Polk County, the board rate, we go from, it used to be the $698 rate. It's now, we pay $800. So, and those are all, that extra is all county dollars. The $698 before that, that's a mix, could be a mix of state and county dollars, or it could be a mix of state, county, and federal dollars. I don't want to bore you and get too much into the weeds into the funding streams, but typically there are two funding streams. One is a mix of federal, state, and county dollars, and the other is a mix of just state and county dollars.
No, this is an important issue because I know that in the previous podcast with Jake Johnson, he ended by saying, I'm also concerned about foster kids, and I'm working on something on that respect. And so how we judge our elected leaders, how we choose them, is in part, how well they manage to scare up money for these kind of programs, right?
So Jake is actually working with Polk County on a project to expand that professional foster care model. And so I've been very excited that this has been a subject that Jake has been interested in and has been willing to advocate for at the state legislature. I don't know what's going to come of that, but I do know that he's having those conversations, and he is working to see if we can find a way to find some solutions around how we do foster care better in North Carolina, particularly Polk County and the Rutherford region.
If I might ask, just in kind of a long-term, because you say you've been working in this field for a few decades, is North Carolina getting better or worse? I mean, for instance, in schools, for the last decade or so, it's been tough for schools to get the kind of funding from the state legislature that they had in the past. And that might be shifting back now. But I'm just curious as to whether the state has maintained its support.
I don't think the state has kept pace with the growing problem. And that's kind of around a variety of topics. So I feel like from the state, as there's been an increasing need in children coming into care, we haven't really sort of kept pace with keeping funding to keep pace with the growing needs. North Carolina's system is kind of interesting. So the system to our south in South Carolina is a state system. Every county sort of runs the same. There's state mandates, pays the same. Staffing ratios should be the same. They should be state set in the state to state system, so they can do that. In North Carolina, we have state requirements, but we have a county administered program. And so salary can be different. There can be 100 different ways to meet a policy requirement or a state statute. So it gets kind of interesting. But I feel like there are places where the state needs to do a better job of helping support its local counties with DSS. When I first came to work at DSS, the amount of paperwork that we did was a fraction of what we do now.
Well, paperwork never gets simpler.
It never gets simpler, but sort of, it would be nice if the volume didn't go from like this, a little bit of paperwork to like this. I mean, it's a challenge now, I think, for social workers and maybe in any state, but even in North Carolina, to keep up with the paperwork. An example of sort of increasing paperwork. When you first go out and you're working with a family, you're trying to develop a safety plan with that family to ensure the child's going to be safe in the home. So these are the steps that I, as the parent, am willing to take to make sure my child's safe. That used to look like a 1-page document, and it's an 11-page document now. It's quite intimidating. It's not uncommon for families, I think, to look at that document and go, I don't want to sign that. They may be willing to do the things that we have been discussing with them, but that's an intimidating document to put in front of a family and ask them to sign. But the paperwork has increased, and I think the number of things that the state and the federal government want counties to do is increasing, but staffing and support for those agencies hasn't kept pace at the same level.
Well, how many people do you have working with you?
So in our entire sort of division of social services, if I include myself and our director, Josh Kennedy, there's 17 of us. We have divided in, so I have 4 staff positions that are identified for foster care. I have 1.5 positions that are allocated towards what we refer to as in-home. So those are the cases that have concluded with the assessment phase, where we went out and talked with the family to determine if there was any abuse or neglect occurring. So for the cases where we've said, yes, there was a risk to the child or abuse or neglect was occurring, we have 1.5 staff positions that work with those families to try to resolve those issues and prevent the child from moving into foster care. And then I have 4 staff that do assessments themselves. And then we have a couple of folks who do support work for our office. And we have 2 supervisors.
I bet there's a fair bit of burnout, or people find it a little overwhelming.
Yes. So we were lucky in Polk County up until probably around 2013. We had child welfare staff that, if you added all the years of experience, probably had close to 100 years experience in child welfare. 2013 roughly started the period of time where some of those folks retired, took other positions, and we started slowly to see new people come into the office. But for whatever reason, either it's burnout after a couple years, it's not a good fit for them. Maybe there were some health issues. And so we've started to see turnover. And I would say in the past 5-6 years, I mean, it's not uncommon for us to have an opening at any necessarily given time, or several openings. I currently have 1 opening, and I have another staff member that is leaving to take a different job in a different county. But no, it's not uncommon. We hire a lot of young students graduating college to do the work.
A little idealistic and
eager and green, and it's hard work. I mean, it's not work that you get to leave every day at 5:00. You're on call, and so I got a call last night at roughly 1:00 in the morning. That's kind of unusual for me to get that for me to get a call, but I do. But our staff get them. Right now, we have a youth in our building that we have no placement for. And so we are working currently to hopefully find a placement for our youth. But if not, I will have 2 staff that will sleep at the building tonight and each and every night until we locate a placement for that young lady.
Well, good luck. I mean, for her. I think that just about covers all the questions that I had rolling around in my head on this. Because again, this is something that someone suggested to me as a good idea, and because I hadn't spent a lot of time thinking about it. And so, do you, you could have like a little PR message, a little PSA on the radio or something. What would you tell people about the opportunities maybe to take part as a foster parent, or getting involved in some other way?
So certainly if you're interested in being a foster parent, contact our office. We're always looking for more foster parents. And even if you think, I don't know that I would want to serve as a foster parent and have a kid in my house, all the time. We need folks who can do respite. Our foster parents need breaks. Every so often they may need a weekend or a week just where they don't have a a child in their home and they're able to go off and they're able to sort of have some time to themselves. And so we need families that are willing to say, yes, I will be a respite parent for this child for the weekend or for a week or every so often. So we want to be able to give foster parents that break because it is hard work. It's really intense and it's hard work. And so giving them a break, I think, helps us create a way to maintain those foster parents who can and are willing to do this long term. So that'd be the first thing if you're interested.
I never heard that phrase before, respite parent.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got a spare room in your house and maybe a little bit extra time.
Yeah, we contact, I mean, we still have to license. So they still have to license even respite foster parents. But yeah, that would be, it's a great place. So I think that's one place. I think the other places is finding ways that, so my office, the Division of Social Services, and any social services offices in the state, we can't be the sole organization that's charged with protecting children. It takes a community. And so I would say if being a foster parent isn't a good fit for you, or if being a respite parent isn't a good fit for you, find some place in your community to volunteer or help out or become knowledgeable about that is a good fit for you or that person. Whether that may be volunteering at your local domestic violence shelter, whether that may be learning about what substance misuse disorders look like, and so that you're better able and to recognize signs and symptoms, and maybe you can help somebody or point someone in the direction, learn about the services in our community. Get involved with another organization that, maybe as its primary mission or as a byproduct is geared towards strengthening children and families in a prevention way. Big brothers, big sisters could be an option. Churches have lots of sort of options where they do that sort of work. Rob and the With All program is, they're trying to create volunteers in our community to help support children and families if they're having a tough time. So finding ways to help support each other, people we know, people we don't know, so that their families become stronger, is a great place to start. It doesn't have to be that you have to become a foster parent. I certainly appreciate if it's something you're interested in, but I know that's not for everyone.
Well, I think there's probably a few families out there, or empty nesters whose kids have moved on to college or whatever, who might be able to think about that kind of thing.
I think that would be fantastic. Our licensing worker's name is Ruth Richardson. She's phenomenal. She would love to hear from anyone who's interested.
Is there a lot of paperwork?
Ruth handles most of the paperwork.
Okay.
There's still some paperwork. We ask lots of questions, and it may feel like we're getting a little nosy, but I think about it this way: if you were to have my child, what would I want to know about you?
Sure.
I'd want to know lots. So we ask lots of questions, but Ruth handles most of the paperwork.
All right. Well, I think that's a really good place to stop, because there's nothing more important than people understanding that it does take a community to be strong enough so that we don't get to the point where your office has to intervene, right?
That's absolutely right. So if we can do more on the front end to create strong, healthy families, then we're preventing children from entering foster care.
All right. Well, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, James, for having me.
That's it for this episode. Next time, we'll do something a little less heavy. I'll be talking with Tangi Morgan, the mayor of Saluda, about something that, if you weren't from Saluda, you might be a little surprised to learn actually is a little controversial: Coondog Day. In the meantime, if you need to get a hold of me, you can always email me at jamesh@polklore.com. Thanks for listening.